Welcome to Grown Up Storytime 139.
Woo! Still virtual, still at home.
Still at home. I'm Emily. Uh,
Claire.
we produce Grown Up Storytime together. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight in this digital landscape of Grown Up Storytime. First off, we want to start by saying that we do pay all of our artists, and we do that based on revenue from the show. So if you want to contribute to artist payments, our Venmo is at Gust Houston. And if you don't have Venmo, but you still want to contribute, you should just DM us or get in touch with us and we can figure that out. But thank you everyone for being here. And if you can and are able to, we really appreciate you helping us pay the artists tonight.
Yeah. Also, we love everybody who sent in stories and everybody who's thinking about sending in stories. We have time to read them. I think I've been editing with a writer over the weekend. So if you have even just a story idea, a story outline, you can send that in to our grownupstorytimehouston@gmail.com. And we will collaborate with you. Or if you're just like, I think I've got something, I just don't know what to do with it, that's where you send it, grownupstorytimehouston@gmail.com. Also on our Instagram, because we haven't been doing writing workshops, although that will change. We will do the workshops. But there is like a workshop breakdown on our Insta stories and our highlights. So you can check out those tips and tricks if you are just wanting some encouragement to get started from your social media.
Yeah, the submission deadline is always rolling too. You don't have to wait to submit to a certain story time or whatever. It's kind of, you can just email us at any time. Next we want to talk about, we are making a commitment to have a guest producer at least every other month or sort of every other month, depending on people's schedules, in an effort to just bring more voices that are inclusive and appropriate to the landscape of Houston on the production team of Grown Up Storytime. So next month will be guest produced by Brenda Valdivia, who has been a Storytime participant before. She's written, she's performed, she has hosted Triple Threat. She's going to be our guest producer next month, so you will be hearing more from her soon. And she will be curating and picking your stories. And there's no theme, so you can send stories in at any time. And we're really looking forward to working with Brenda. So I hope that you look forward to seeing the story time that she curates as well.
Yeah. And so, speaking of hosts, we have hosts. You may recognize them from previous guests, like 136. We are bringing back the Effin' Rager boys, Connor and Ned. We are so happy just to collaborate with them. And going forward, we're probably, well, first of all, we are collaborating with them on how to make Grown Up Storytime virtual stuff work. So they have been a huge help in us transitioning to the virtual platform. And you're probably going to be seeing a lot of them until we are able to return into the Rudyard's stage. So let's bring them on, yeah?
Yeah. Oh, first, one more thing before we start the show. One last reminder. If you're just tuning in and you missed our first announcement, our Venmo is at Gust Houston. We'll put it in the description. It'll be in the event profile. It'll be on Instagram. You'll be able to find it. Send us money so we can pay people, please. And thank you.
Tip us for stories.
Okay, Ned and Connor, take it away.
Thank you for the applause.
Wow, thank you.
Oh my
thank
God.
You. Oh gosh.
Please stop.
Okay,
That's enough.
right.
That's enough.
Down,
We
stop.
said stop.
Please.
Hi everyone. Welcome to Grown Up Storytime 139. I'm Connor Clifton.
And I'm Ned Gayle.
And together we are Effin' Rager.
Effin' Rager. We host a
Rager.
show called FM Rager
Rager.
that used to be on the radio and was never on FM. That's
It was
not important.
That's not important. What is important is Grown Up Storytime 139, which is tonight, which is what we are hosting. Yes, as Emily and Blair said in the intro, you're going to be seeing a lot more of us soon. And one of the things I want to get out of the way right now is I know everyone at home is probably experiencing cabin fever right now.
Cramped up, yeah.
Ooh, it's probably awful. And since this is the second time you've seen us host, Ned and I were talking, and we really don't want y'all to feel cabin fever through our house.
Yeah, if you've watched the Effin' Ragers show before, which I hope all of you have, you're probably pretty sick of this background. You've only seen this part of our house. Well, we want you guys to be comfortable. Our house is your house.
Yes. So I don't know how many people out there are familiar with the term architectural horror. Movies such as Crawl or Don't Breathe. Don't Breathe?
Yeah. Yes, yeah.
Yeah. The idea of being stuck in a place and exploring every single aspect of that
every single
place.
edge of it, letting the house itself become a character in the film. Much like New York in most films about New York. But we wanted to take a little twist on that. We didn't want to give you architectural horror.
Right.
We thought about a little bit of architectural fun.
That's right. We're going to be trying to step out of our comfort zone and show you around our house and explore the different rooms that we have. And we just want to show you what we got.
Don't think of it so much as a tour, but think of it as a look through the window. Nay, a step inside of the window and into the house. I guess it's a tour. We could call it a tour.
We're gonna give you a tour of the house. But it's not going to be all one shot, so you can't design blueprints.
Nice try, buds.
Yeah, you will become intimate with our space, but you still won't know how to break in.
That's true. And hey, maybe we'll even show you our rooms.
Not gonna happen. I'm not gonna show you my room.
Well, we're probably gonna end up showing you our rooms. It's part of the tour.
Not gonna let you see my room.
There's only so many rooms in the house and only so many stories in this. It just kind of matches up. We would both show our rooms.
You're right. There are 6 stories and 7 rooms, so we just don't have to include my room at all.
Well, we're probably going to include your room. I was saying that the maybe thing is a fun, tease the audience, but we're definitely going to show your room, so just get over it, buddy.
We're not going to be doing it. You can drop it. And as we get ready for our next story, you go ahead and get that introduced, and I'm just going to go ahead and get stuff ready for the rest of the show.
Yeah, go ahead. Okay. So like I said, we're just going to be helping out with any form of cabin fever you may have with any roommates or possibly driving you mad because they just walk so heavily and stomp every single day, and they find themselves wrapping their toes into the ground and scraping with their toenails at every hour of the night, destroying the finish in the ground. Yeah, you probably have something like that, but that's not important. What's important is your very first story, and that story is Sleeveless Bandits, written by John Wayne Communale and read by Ilyas Brown.
There's really nothing like a good prank to make you feel like you're alive. And I don't mean some quick one-and-done gotcha type of prank. Oh, sure, those are fine for a laugh and easy enough to pull off. But where's the challenge? Where's the art? Most importantly, where's the danger? The kind of prank I'm talking about is heist-like in nature. It's the kind that requires a small, tight-knit group who bring their own specific contributions together to create magic. You don't want to work with someone who may go rogue and change the plan on the fly in the thick of it because they think they know better. No matter how appealing the idea of having a wild card on the team might seem, they inevitably end up as the fly in the proverbial ointment. The key to a great prank is, like an onion, it contains many layers which continue to unfold along the way. Herein lies the aforementioned art. If you succeed in adding a psychological aspect to the prank, one that will continue to vex your target long after all is said and done, well, what more could you ask for, really? Sometimes, though, it's just not in the cards for you, no matter how much you plan, no matter how many precautions you take, and no matter how much you trust your team. Sometimes, it's just not enough. I was a theater kid in high school and hung with my small circle of theater kid friends doing stupid theater kid things. One of those things was pranking, as well as giving each other a rash of shit anytime we could for absolutely no reason. What a time. On occasion, we'd prank outside of our small immediate circle, which typically bore cataclysmic results, but we were nothing if not consistent. One of these specific unfortunate backfires occurred despite our very best laid plans, and we were forced to concede. It was beautiful when I think about it, really. We were friends with these two sisters who were both in theater with us and were separated by 3 years. Naturally, we'd known the oldest sister longer, but we were familiar with the entire family nearly from the start. Their parents would volunteer and help out during speech tournaments with judging and general organization. The dad was the general manager of a popular Italian restaurant and would often donate food to our events, as well as provide meals for the cast of a play on performance nights. It was because of their frequent involvement we got to know the entire family fairly well. We were even invited to their home for dinner and to watch Rockets games on the big screen TV they had in their game room. The girls also had one other younger sister who was around 5 or 6 during this time, and she would sometimes even eat pizza and watch basketball with us. They were a pretty great family who really went out of their way to make us feel welcome and keep us fed and entertained. Naturally, they had to go down. The impetus of the prank was birthed early on, but needed time to incubate into what it would eventually become. It started with the acknowledgement of an anomaly that, once noticed, could not be unseen. During the run of a play all of us happened to be involved in, we saw the girl's father on a nearly daily basis for a few weeks, either picking up his daughters or bringing food for the cast. This was when we all came to a conscious realization of something. Every single time we saw this man, he wore a shirt with no sleeves. Every time, there were no exceptions. It wasn't that we happened to be catching him only during times of leisure either. This was a 24/7 thing. He attended each performance of the play sleeveless. He showed up to judge at speech tournaments sleeveless. And every time we were at his house, he was sleeveless. We never were able to be at his restaurant when he was working, but we all strongly believed he was somehow permitted to do his job without sleeves. We were honestly starting to wonder if it was a medical condition. The plan was birthed and solidified in a single moment, and if I hadn't been there myself, I wouldn't have believed it. My 4 friends and I were at the sisters' home one evening as we were all meeting there to go to a movie together. We were in the living room getting ready to leave when we discovered, quite by accident, a consistency present in each and every family photo. The patriarch of the family was sleeveless in all of them. It was baffling to the point of thinking we ourselves may be the ones being pranked, but this was not the case. No matter the occasion, the time of year, or any other circumstance relating to the photo, nary a hint of a sleeve could be found on the man. Much later that night, after we'd been to the movie and back, and the sisters had said goodnight and gone inside, the planning began. It was simple, really, but the best things usually are. We decided to get as many old t-shirts as we could together, cut off the sleeves, place the sleeves themselves in a box, and leave it on their door with no explanation. Just thinking about it still makes me giggle. Over the next week, we sprung into action to put everything together, and by Friday, we had a very full box of random sleeves in all shapes and colors. I drove a small pickup truck at the time, so that night everyone loaded into the back while I drove us to the house. When we pulled up and made sure the coast was clear, the designated boxman raced to the front door and gingerly placed the box atop the welcome mat. In a flash, he was back in the truck and we were gone in an instant, just as we'd planned. Before we knew it, we were back at my place high-fiving, reveling in our genius, and guessing what the family's reaction would be. All there was left to do was wait, so we said our goodbyes until we would reconvene the next day to further celebrate in our success. My phone rang much earlier the next morning than I'd anticipated, and I wasn't sure if that was a good sign or not. "They know it was us, and they're pissed," my friend said through the receiver. "We have to go over and apologize now." I was still groggy and needed further clarification. Apparently they found the box when they woke up, and when they saw it was full of the sleeves, there was an adverse reaction we hadn't counted on. To put it mildly, they absolutely freaked out. For whatever reason, they found the box threatening, believing it was sent by some evil night stalker to let them know he was targeting them. They also thought it might be a message from a kidnapper telling them he was coming for their youngest child, but I'm still not sure how they put any of it together. Either way, they told the police all of their theories, and after having called in to report it, the sisters started making calls to the group to tell us the disturbing news. When you pull a heist or a prank, it's essential each member of the team can keep their mouths shut and not crack under pressure. This was the weak link in our group, however, and apparently less than a minute into the phone call, one of our guys was singing like a canary. He gave all of us up. He told them the motivations behind the prank, including our theory that the dad didn't own a shirt with sleeves. This did not go over well with them. His reason for confessing was he didn't want them to continue worrying they were in some kind of danger. But alas, it was one of the many layers that remained unpeeled because of his admission. An hour later, the 5 of us assembled on the family's porch to receive the requisite ear beating, followed by the demand for an apology. They didn't find it the least bit funny and were even offended. I didn't understand how they could be when everything we based the prank on was completely true. In fact, they failed to see the irony when I pointed out, as we were apologizing, that the dad was currently wearing a sleeveless shirt. I personally resented having to apologize for the prank, and the failure on their end to find any humor in it still baffles me to this day. Presently, at this time in my life, I too have joined the ranks of the sleeveless shirt wearers, but I hold my head up proudly. Anti-sleevers should band together, not be divided, and I feel badly that the dad didn't feel secure enough at the time to embrace his sleevelessness. I lost touch with the sisters and their family shortly after high school, which was for the best, and I have no idea whatever happened to them. A part of me hopes they kept those sleeves and sewed them onto all his sleeveless shirts just to stick it to us, thus peeling back the final layer of a perfect prank.
Keep it going for John Wayne Communale and Ilyas Brown? Ilyas Brown. Thank you so much for that story. For our first little tour of the house, we wanted to show off this cool door we have.
And we also wanted to show off our cool sleeveless shirts.
That's right. We're part of the sleeveless shirt gang. This one goes out to you, Rahul, and you.
Yeah, John Wayne.
Yeah.
And the bass player of a band I saw in January.
Tattoo artist.
Yeah, guys, tattoo shops. This goes out to you guys.
Yeah. People who are like your friend's flavor of the month.
I'm gonna put my sleeves back on. Can you introduce the next song?
These are zip-off
Or
sleeves
next
anyway.
story.
I can reattach them whenever I want. Look, we're gonna go ahead and bring up your next reader, bring up your next story here. Please give a warm welcome for Wah-Hua, written by Daniel Cohen and read by Jason Wysong.
Wah-Hua. I found a Wah-Hua, Jen explained. It was a big moment. My wife had always grown up thinking she was a cat person. We had always had cats. Actually, she had always had cats. I grew up with dogs, though discovered I was cool with cats and pretty much any other cute little animal. However, she had discovered something even more profound. She was a dog person, as evidenced by our trip to visit my brother in New Jersey. There, she fell head over heels for his buddy Yoda, a Chihuahua with a deer head and a love of snuggles and sunshine. Shortly after we returned from one of our trips to visit Yoda, or rather my brother's whole family, we started looking for a dog just like him. We viewed what felt like 1,000 different dogs around Houston, but Jen really wanted a Chihuahua, or as we say in our living room when no one's around, we want a Wah-Hua. Sometime into her 7th visit to a shelter, Jen almost walked right past the 4-pound Chihuahua in the shelter's visitation room before noticing a sign indicating the presence of a canine. The shelter volunteer even initially expressed some skepticism when she asked to see him. "Oh, you want to see Oscar?" Her voice dropped with doubt. But when Jen entered the visitation room, the little blue shelter blanket in the corner stirred, and out came a fabulous little hound to sit in her lap. His reputation as a snappy little thing vanished into the standard cuddles of a warm and friendly Wah-Hua. A day later, she brought him home. Oscar was a name the shelter had given our newly adopted friend, and it never did seem to fit the little guy. So after soliciting the internet for names and trying out a few ourselves, from Pico, Cuatro, Puck, Pepe, Bruiser, Chimichanga, Pip, Biscuit, Adam, Pixel, Toby, Bartok, Bitsy, Che, Frito, Sweet Pea, Chi-Chi, Kevin, Frank, and Rufus Cadbury Woodsworth III. We finally settled on a name that would forever brand him a good boy. Bueno. Bueno settled into our house pretty quickly. He had a little quick snarl and snap at first, but some steady and dedicated discipline fixed that. I guess when you're 5 pounds, a simple snap of the finger must sound like thunderstorm, thunderbolt. I didn't want to scare the poor baby, but I did want to make sure that he didn't nip a kid, so I would snap. Within a week or so, he was warmed all the way up to the two of us and even started to consider making friends around the complex. Human friends, anyways. He barked at literally almost every other single dog we passed on our walks, and not like a few barks and move on. Like a full-on bark, sharp, all the way up to your ears, that made you feel like your nose was going to bleed or his head would fly off his body. I would have to keep him moving along as we walked, so I didn't wind up letting a 5-pound animal yell for several minutes straight 4 times a day. So the only other Wah-Hua on the street, Pappy, wanted to be friends with our boy. But Bueno never wanted to return the favor. It's hard to blame him. He's been through 2 shelters and was at least one time an owner surrender. In all likelihood, he had spent a lot of time on the street. And when you're 5 pounds on the street, getting food and scaring away predators means persuading them that you're going to be too expensive to tussle with. In Pappy's case, Bueno didn't really attempt to intimidate, but instead hid behind me. Annoyed that his paw was trying to force him to be friends with another Chihuahua, like, look man, just because we're both Wah-Huas doesn't mean we think the same things, okay? But most of his favorite times weren't outside at all. We lived fetching crinkly toys. He liked running back and forth like a bullet whenever it was his time to put on his harness and go outside. More than anything, he wanted to be under a blanket or in the lap of one of his owners. Nothing was more comforting than sleeping with him at night, save for the moment when you'd come home and he would squirm and whine and beg to be picked up. His front 2 feet bouncing and tapping the floor, almost as though he were preparing to fly away. He always heard Jen coming from the parking lot 30 seconds before I did, thanks to his supersonic hearing. And nothing was better than hearing her come home, take her bags out of her hands, and watching her squirm with delight as she picked up the little baby. She walked Bueno in the morning. I usually walked him 3 other times around midday, happy hour, and before bed. I worked from home, so I was able to take him out more often and spend more time with him during the day. He was the best possible break from the work I do, or really the work anyone does, because he ran on love. My job and my family and my hobbies involved getting judged. Bueno and judgment didn't belong in the same sentence. All I ever got was acceptance. I wish I could achieve the level of acceptance that dogs have for the world. We are so lucky to have them. But if I could emulate them just a bit more, I wonder if that would change that dynamic. The truth is, humanity sucks at acceptance. We're supposed to accept the things we cannot change, goes the saying, but there are whole other groups about that, I hear, and people who struggle with it from the day they become conscious of such a challenge to the day they leave Earth, and I empathize with them. It was a Wednesday in January, 6 months after we brought him home from the shelter. It had been a lousy, terrible, rotten year for me, complete with a personal betrayal of a close friend, a good friend moving out of Houston, and a macro-level slide towards nationalistic fascism. I was on the phone talking tactics for political action when suddenly things changed. I turned to the middle of the room to see my boy on the floor. He didn't look happy. He didn't look ready to be picked up. He had the lowest energy level I had ever seen. Bueno? No response. Bueno! I hung up, picked him up, and sprinted to the car, making sure to secure his head as best as I could. I paused for a millisecond to make sure he was breathing and his heart was beating, but that was it. The rest was sprinting and crying and yelling. I don't know if you've ever had a living thing you've loved struggling for life in your arms before, but that's when you do when that happens. You beg, you plead, you use every possible sound to keep your loved one conscious. You're trying to save them, but you're probably also reassuring yourself. In this case, it was please, 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 and bueno, bueno. A little singy, songy way we spoke to him to show him love, but with this time tainted with panic, dread, fear, just beyond the point of paralysis. I hurried as fast as I could while guaranteeing not to get in a wreck or pop a tire. An accident was a death sentence. The local vet was only a few minutes away. I parked, ran him in, and in a voice so calm it surprised me, I said, "I have an emergency." They looked shocked, but came to get him and took him to the back to take action. A receptionist took me to a side room and asked what happened. I told her, voice shaking, and she left for 10 very long minutes. During those 10 minutes, I fell into the kind of bargaining many of us do when we have run out of ideas and fate seems firmly in control of our steering wheel. One thought kept coming back to me. Not my dog. I thought of everything I would prefer to lose instead. Burn down my house, total my car, shit, chop off my foot. I'll get a prosthetic one. I write for a living. I'll be okay. Just not my dog. The vet came out to tell me the score. They were having trouble keeping the catheter in. Time was running out and I needed to take him to an animal ER that was better prepared about 10 minutes down the road. They brought Bueno outside, wrapped with plastic gloves full of warm water to keep his temperature up. They put him in the front seat, and I was off on my second pet ambulance race of the hour, singing harder, looking over at him, pleading, telling him what a good boy he was. It took me 15 minutes to get there. I ran my boy inside, and they took him to the back. I found myself in a waiting room again, found myself pleading again. Not my dog. The vet came in. The patient's levels are not stable. The blood pressure is up just enough to get a catheter in, but he's not stable. That's all we know. On my ride home, I called Jen. There was no easy way to tell her what was going on. She cried on the phone, then said she planned to leave work early to come home. Early evening, we called the vet to let us know that we could come home, we could come in to visit and hear about what he was doing. She let us know his blood pressure was up and that some of his other vitals had improved. When we saw him, he was scared and looked like he felt cruddy. He was in the back of the cage. He growled a little bit, but he let us feed him some chicken. Then the vet let us know some good news. In all likelihood, Bueno had an apoplectic reaction to something. His liver levels and kidney levels hadn't recovered, but those usually lagged behind some other indicators, all of which were improving. So we expected him to recover and be home in a couple of days. The rest of Thursday was a relieved sense of normalcy. I saw some friends that evening. I told them the whole story, how relieved I was. My nightly voicemail from the vet said he was doing awesome. The next morning, I got a call that sounded entirely different. After informing me that his liver levels had gotten worse, they asked if I could come in at midday. Jen again left for work to come with me. We were brought into a room with a veterinary specialist who asked, "Do you know if you have any palms around you and if it's possible that maybe he ate some?" We looked at each other. There are palms near our condos where people take puppies to go potty, where Benny and Bueno and the two Yorkies who belong to the judgy guy and Pappy and everyone we know on the block take a stroll. We didn't see that. We have them, but I didn't see that happen, I said through tears. The vet informed us that either the dog had eaten a palm or that he had a reaction to something else, but that either way, his liver levels were highest he'd ever seen, As he began to outline the treatment, the amount of time, the odds, the cost, I began to cry. Not my dog! Not my dog! See, 10 months prior, Jen and I had to say goodbye to one of our cats, Sergeant Pepper, who had a carcinoma growth in his mouth. He was nearly 13 and Jen had kept him near her entire adult life. It was a terrible time and we missed him like crazy. I had a week to say bye to him. The best week of his life, where he ate only treats and hung out on our patio and hunted and sat below his favorite cactus and snacked on catnip, all he wanted, and enjoyed a fentanyl patch. It hurt like hell for us, but he departed in our living room because we had time and the budget to plan for it. Bueno got no such treatment. He was in a cage most of the last 2 days of his 4.5 years life. We thought he would survive the day before he died. It was all we could do to stay with him at the end, feeding him a few treats, then shaking in tears as the vet put him to sleep in Jen's arms. There's nothing to say in the wake of such a loss that can make it feel better. People tell you you'll be okay, that time heals all wounds, but none of that makes time move faster. I try to believe in the Rainbow Bridge. It goes against my understanding of the world, but it makes me feel a little bit better to think that maybe I'll frolic with my boy again one day and he'll speed like a bullet across the grass, cock his head, yap, leap, ask for pets, lick my face, and be young once more as I knew him for the time I had him and as I choose to remember him. But I still cry when I think about he was my dog.
For that wonderful story. As Ned walks up here, I'd like to take the time to thank you once again for watching this show. There were 2 major online streaming events tonight, and you chose the right one.
What was the other one?
The DNC.
Oh. I was like, we could be watching something else.
The only show with somehow more technical glitches than our show.
Guys, if we learned anything from that story, it's that to hold that which is important to you close while you have it. You know, we're only on this rock for so long, and we truly need to appreciate things. And we'll always have those memories. And speaking of which, if you do have memories you want to look back on, you can always check the Grown Up Storytime Instagram to see some of those old memories. But did you point at it again?
I assume it's
here.
You're
knock it off the screen. No, but we wanted to say that you know it's there's no better place in our house to appreciate the things that we have while we have them than our freaking kitchen.
Yeah, you know, where things can spoil and
go bad. This garlic could probably go bad eventually.
Yeah,
probably won't. We'll use it.
Yeah, we'll use it.
Oh, or these bananas that are browning. Ooh, that's squishy.
Oh yeah, that's very
squishy. We could eat these right now. Because we might not get a chance tomorrow. They're gonna be too gushy to eat them tomorrow.
I mean,
let's just eat them on camera right now.
We
get some potassium.
Freeze them, make them smoothies.
Well, we don't have a blender or anything, so let's just eat them right now. Here, I'll break one off.
You know what?
We'll
You
do a
get
two-pack.
You get that going, and
Okay.
I'll queue up the next story.
Okay. I guess I'll eat this gooey banana by myself real quick on camera. Just get this guy open here. Oh, it's looking soft. Okay. Woo. I'll just introduce the story. We'll do that. So your next story is Night in Nicaragua, written by Alex Currier and read by Sneha Desai.
Wah-Hua. I found a Wah-Hua, Jen explained. It was a big moment. My wife had always grown.
The first time I went to Nicaragua was in July of 2017. I was enrolled in a certification program to teach English as a foreign language, and I chose Nicaragua because I wanted to improve my Spanish. I spent 6 months there in 2017 and near the end met a nice, handsome man. We kept in touch while I was back in the States. He became not just a nice man, but my boyfriend, and I decided to visit him for the month of June 2018. In April of 2018, there was an uprising by the people of Nicaragua, which expressed itself through countrywide protests against the increasingly dictatorial government. The government of Nicaragua responded to these protests by sending paramilitary pro-government groups into communities, threatening the families of organizers and shooting protesters while simultaneously doing their very best to suppress news reporting by non-governmental news providers. Those are the Cliff Notes. And I encourage anyone who's curious about this event to educate themselves, as I wouldn't consider myself to be a credible news source. This is the backdrop and necessary context for the story I will tell. As I said earlier, I decided to visit Nicaragua again in June 2018 to spend time with my boyfriend, Marvin. Things seemed to have calmed down politically by then, but at the end of the first week I spent there was a sudden change. I'm not sure why, but I think there was news of a pro-government paramilitary group headed for Leon. In one day, the landscape of the entire city changed completely. The citizens of Leon pried up the cobblestones of the streets and used whatever other objects at hand to make barriers at the end of each street so that no one could just drive through neighborhoods shooting their guns. One of the police stations was set on fire and abandoned. I don't remember seeing any police officers for weeks after that. Guns are not common or easy to come by in Nicaragua. So people made homemade mortars to fire at whomever might come at them and settled in to guard their homes and businesses against any potential violence. They guarded these barriers, tranques or tranks as they call them, carefully and at all hours. The citizens guarding the tranks kept their faces covered for fear of having their picture taken by government sympathizers and being threatened or even kidnapped as a result. It was a nervous time. My boyfriend and I didn't leave the hostel for days. And when we eventually ventured out, it was only in the afternoon to quickly run out for groceries. And when we did, there was often broken glass, nails bent in a fashion to stick into tires running over them, and marks on the walls of houses, mute testimony to whatever action had taken place the night before. It was during these uncertain times that another guest at the hostel got sick. Aaron had been suffering to one degree or another all day with fever and stomach cramps and altogether unpleasantness. But he and his wife Mary figured he just needed rest. Aaron is from the US and his wife is from Germany. Neither speak much Spanish, but they had been traveling through Central America for a month or so and landed in Nicaragua at a particularly difficult time politically. Mary, Marvin, and I were passing an otherwise uneventful night in the hostel with beers and stories amid the usual cacophony of gecko songs, dog barks, and frog calls, along with the more ominous explosive noises emanating from homemade mortars and occasionally guns in the street outside. Mary went to check in on Aaron and came back very concerned. She said that Aaron was feeling much worse and didn't think he would be able to make it through the night without medical care. Usually, this would be a concerning, but not altogether alarming situation involving calling an ambulance or a taxi and getting him to the hospital in a short amount of time. However, these were different times. With all the tranks in place, no vehicle had a prayer of making it through, and Aaron wasn't well enough to walk very far. In addition, it was nearing midnight, a time when no sensible person would attempt to go out of doors without worrying very seriously about their own safety. Marvin and I reached out to everyone we knew in the city, trying to find someone who could help, but no one had any solutions. After much discussion, it was decided that Marvin would go out and see what help he could find at the nearest trank. I waited anxiously in the hostel, phone at hand, listening to the pained half-whispers Aaron exchanged with his wife about his condition. He was feverish with tingling and numbness in his extremities and stomach cramps, which had caused him to forsake most forms of nourishment and hydration for several hours. After an agonizing 40 minutes, Marvin returned with 5 strangers, faces covered with scarves, goggles, and other makeshift masks. "Tell them not to be alarmed," he assured me. "They don't have a lot of trust and prefer to keep their faces covered, but they are going to help." At first, they attempted to carry Aaron using a sheet, but he was too heavy. One of our saviors was a woman and happened to be a doctor. She asked him about his condition and what he had taken so far to ameliorate his symptoms. Aaron decided to attempt walking, but after shakily traversing 20 feet with much assistance, it became clear that that was not a viable option. In the end, a fold-up beach chair was converted into a makeshift stretcher, and we thus began our journey through the dark, treacherous streets. Aaron's bearers walked in front, and Mary and I held up the rear, carrying what few items we thought we might need. I can't say I remember too many details of that approximately 7 or 8 block walk. I remember the yellow light reflected off the cobblestones and that every corner there were tranks and people manning them. Thankfully, our party was clearly composed of people who protected their own trank and a sick person who could not walk on his own. Shouts were exchanged as we scurried quickly around the barriers. Some were friendly, others were laced with curses. I kept my head down for the most part, as I knew the people out in the streets at this time wouldn't take kindly to being scrutinized. Those who guarded the tranks covered their faces for a very good reason, and anyone not known to them was suspect, though foreigners were often assumed to not be a threat, as they were unlikely to be involved in the politics of the country. In a relatively short time, we arrived at a nearby clinic. My impression of our reluctant heroes is that they were young and modestly good-natured. They earnestly told us we should let them know if we needed anything more. I wondered what they thought they might be able to do for us that they hadn't already done. Marvin later told me that at first they had refused to help, saying it was too dangerous. Only after exaggerating the relationship and saying Aaron and Mary were very close friends was he able to convince them to come to our aid. Thus were the times. Anyone not of the neighborhood or well known to a trank guard was denied passage, meaning people were mostly keeping close to home. Early in the day, it was possible to go out for necessities and wander around a little. At night, everyone stayed inside. The doctor and nurse on duty at the clinic were matter-of-fact and honestly seemed tired. They took Aaron's temperature, asked him what he had taken that day, and insisted he drink as much suero, which is essentially just water mixed with electrolytes, as he could stomach. Aaron's condition ended up being the result of severe dehydration, fever, and a bacterial infection in his gastrointestinal tract. He was hallucinating at one point, telling Mary and I he didn't want to lose his legs, even as we assured him that would not happen. As the night wore on, his delirium subsided and so did his fever. Marvin and I waited out the night in the hallway, though I entered the room whenever a translator was needed. We knew that having arrived at the clinic in the dark of the night, we would not be leaving it until the sun rose. A day or two later, Aaron and Mary asked Marvin to take them to the trank from whence he recruited our volunteer heroes, and they took the opportunity to thank them and give them a little money in gratitude for the risk that they had taken for them. I came away from that night inspired by the kindness and compassion shown to strangers. The unfortunate, just to put it mildly, political situation in Nicaragua caused tension and suspicion on all sides. And it's all too easy to sometimes forsake those unknown to you. I felt that night I had glimpsed that part of the human spirit I always wanted to believe is there. The part that recognizes and honors a shared humanity. Thank you.
Wow, what an incredible story. Holy moly. There's just something to be said about the humanity in these people. I mean, being so neighborly and helping your friends out. I kind of want to be neighborly with you guys for a moment and invite you into my room just to get a quick little peek. So I'm going to do that real quick. Let's All right, this is it. This is where I sleep at night. It's not clean, it's not dirty, but I know where my pants are, and it's where I sleep. But speaking of neighborly, I think our neighbors are actually heading over right now. Let me just get that. Just get that there. Can you help me out here? Just all right. There we go. If you just, I'm gonna go lock the back door. Could you take this real quick?
Okay, so if you want to be neighborly to people that you know, you can go ahead and donate to the Grown Up Storytime Venmo, which is right here. Yeah, so go ahead and donate to that. Remember, it's a good way to help support the readers and writers and the hosts and the organizers and the host and, everybody involved in Grown Up Storytime. But for now, why don't we go ahead and get your next story up? Your next story is called The Narcissist and the Sociopath. Sorry, I have a speech impediment, so it's kind of hard. The Narcissist and the Sociopath, written by Teresa Campbell and read by Alyssa Schindler.
The Narcissist and the Sociopath. I was living in a hotel by this time. Going back home scared me. My husband John messaged me to say that he had started seeing a therapist of his own about a month ago, before I left. This didn't sound right. He had been so resistant to going to therapy before, even to me going on my own. The only time he had considered attending therapy with me was on the advice of another woman. The other woman. He woke me up in the middle of the night to get our story straight for the therapist while denying he was doing so. I did not take him with me that day. I gave him the benefit of the doubt, as usual, though I had no reason to believe he was seeing this therapist. Okay, how is that going? I wanted to give him an opportunity to talk about it without being invasive. Well, not good, he replied. She thinks I'm dealing with a narcissist. Wow. And feels like you exhibit traits of a sociopath. Oh, he's talking about me. I told him that frightened me. He said he was sorry, but still chose to send me a detailed list of problematic traits, closing with, "There's more, but you get the point." In a daze of panic, I asked myself if these things are true. If they are true, can I fix them? In a relationship like this, you stop trusting yourself and regularly rely on your partner for an accurate view of reality. Gaslight. I took a screen grab and sent it to my friend Tina with the only word I could type. Help. My mind raced, but only in circles. Am I a narcissist? Am I a sociopath? Do I really have to wait 5 more days to talk to my therapist about this? Will this ruin every relationship I ever have? John keeps telling me it will. Is he right? Why would he tell me that if he didn't mean it or didn't think it was true? He's supposed to love me. He always tells me that I will never understand how much he loves me and that nobody else could ever love me the way that he does. Red flag. With the help of friends, family, and therapists, I was able to dissect this situation. My mother reminded me that if she had sniffed any of these traits, she would have sent me to therapy herself years ago. Tina reminded me that no narcissist would ever wonder how to fix themselves. Aaron, my therapist, made me self-evaluate with checklists of the dreaded traits. He seemed amused throughout and sometimes holding back a giggle. He had met John a couple of times on my insistence and had a confident grasp on what he saw. Projection. Almost everyone questioned whether he had actually seen a therapist. Would any decent professional label someone without even meeting them? Stella, my best friend of over 25 years, may have said it best by simply asking, "Who is his therapist, Dr. Diana?" You see, Diana is that other woman. She's my husband's girlfriend. They share multiple musical endeavors with the line between professional and personal blurred to oblivion. Their relationship seems to have started sometime in the spring or summer of 2018 while she was going through a divorce. During that time, he encouraged me to become her friend. "She could use some supportive ladies around her while she goes through this," he would tell me. I welcomed her into my group of friends, many of whom were willing to be there for her because I was willing to be there for her. She didn't seem to have friends here. One evening last summer, about 10 of us, including Diana, spent a ladies' night together at my home, followed by an Astros game and a trip to the bar. 5 days later, she took a road trip to San Antonio with my husband while I was out of town working. They tried to take another secret vacation together in October. That time I caught them. They did not turn around. They did not cut their trip short. One of their stops was a charming Tennessee cottage with a hot tub. How romantic. They also spent a night at the home of Diana's family. The following morning, Facebook informed me that it was my friend Diana's birthday. They did not apologize. They did not end their relationship. In fact, John found at least a dozen ways to tell me that their vacation, their whole relationship actually, was my doing. Was this my fault? Did my shortcomings in our relationship push him into a whole other relationship? I will never forget the day he told me about what he longed for. "I watched Tim and Whitney help each other set up for a gig the other day," he told me. "I wish I had that connection, being able to share music with my partner." I was crushed. I gave him everything I had, including the opportunity to chase that music career. I could only think to myself as I tried to sleep, "You do have that, just not with me." The more I tried, the more often I heard about my lack of effort. Did it even matter? Diana was there to fill the void day and night, all while claiming to be rooting for my marriage. I continued to hear about how I was the one who had clocked out, how I was the toxic force holding us back. I was not enough. Looking back through the years, I was never going to be enough. I hate to quote a cartoon, but when you look at someone through rose-colored glasses, all the red flags just look like flags. Now John and I are divorced, and I'm finding my own happily ever after. Some days, that looks like working towards elevating my career path. Others, it is time well wasted with people I love the most. And there are still a few nights when I sit on my roof and gaze at my old home downtown, crying tears of pain and joy and gratitude for it all. John and Diana are moving in together, likely doomed to a life of never being able to trust one another. My only wish for them is that one day they will ask themselves, "Am I a narcissist? Am I a sociopath?
That was a hell of a story. Congratulations to the writer of that story for being able to move past something so heavy and traumatic. Anyway, here's our bathroom. Don't really have a good transition for that, but our bathroom's really nice. As you can see, it's got 2 lights. Ain't that something? Typical bathroom amenities. We got this clawfoot tub right there. Pretty cool. A lot of bath bombs, CBD bath bombs. Pretty fun. You know, just trying to show some stuff off in the house. Keep these stories moving along. Listen, as you can see here, I'm just trying to fill dead air. You're going to be seeing a lot of me and Ned over these next few months, and we just really want to do a good job. So if you have any questions or comments, anything like that, you know, go ahead and tell us about it, and you can go ahead and submit it to our suggestion box.
Yeah, that's right. The box is a toilet. But you know what's not a toilet is your next story, which is Daniel and Double Impact, read by Ronald Llewelyn Jones and read by Sam Flash.
The Narcissist and the Sociopath. I was living in a hotel by this time.
Moved from Houston in '90. My mom took a risk. She packed our belongings after coordinating with the entire community to secretly escape my abusive dad. It was in the middle of the night. There were lots of people outside our home. They were there to protect us and see that we were able to leave safely. We took everything except for the frame for the bed my parents slept in. We moved to Bay City. It was a small rural town of no more than 18,000 residents. A town that lives in a present that highlights the ills and the evils of the past. There's a Confederate soldier monument on the town square that stands 20 feet tall. A great-grandfather I never met lived there. At the time, I had only heard of my grandfather through distant childhood stories my mom would tell. His name was Tyree. He owns a plot of land that he built 2 homes upon. He resided in the south side, what was once called Colored Town. At the time, he ran a nightclub in the bottom floor of a duplex that sat to the left of his home. He closed it down when he arrived so that we could have a place to live. I didn't know if he was aware that we were coming, but he made space for us regardless. Shortly after settling, I made a new friend, and his name was Daniel. He lives with his cousin, grandmother, and grandfather. And we met while I was playing with my very first friend, Robert, who we only knew as Papa. We played Ninja Turtles. I had to be Leonardo. All the time. Okay. And Daniel was my best friend. He was my age, but a grade ahead of me. I had to take the first grade twice. My mom wasn't confident in my previous teacher's education, her ability to teach me. She was an abusive racist that refused to teach me. School was forced to pay for a tutor, but I was still having difficulties. Daniel's family lived in a trailer that sat on a lot, catty-cornered to my grandfather's land. The grass at Daniel's it kind of makes you itch. You know, we didn't like to play on it. His grandparents would hold Easter egg hunts in their yard, and at one of them I found an egg that contained $5. In my excitement, I showed my mom, but she made me give it back. Though his grandfather told me to keep it. Daniel is Mexican American. His grandparents don't speak English. I could sense that his grandmother doesn't like that we're friends. You know, living in a predominantly black community near the main thoroughfare can be quite dramatic. It can feel like isolating when you don't even know anyone. And where we lived, there's crime. There would always be days when I would find random wallets on the side of the street. I wonder what happened to those people. If anyone may have actually just lost their wallet. But the people in those IDs and driver's licenses never lived in our community. They were all just passing through. For what? Maybe drugs? Colored Town, the South Side, Avenue C, whatever you want to call it, it shares the same narrative as many of the communities black people have attempted to peacefully exist within. It was a struggling community that brought itself to a bustle, a thriving community, and drugs flooded the community and eroded away the vibrancy. The police state took hold, and criminality within the community rose. The experiences and occurrences that took place during this transition are what people hope to evoke when they speak of our side of town. Daniel ran a double impact. It was late in the evening, close to when he would no longer be able to have a company. He wanted me to stay over and finish the movie. "Can he stay the night so we can watch the movie?" he asked his grandmother. She replied in Spanish. I can tell the response was no. Not just no. It was emphatic. I understand all the context that my skin presented to her. The threat of theft, violence, or any number of things people unfairly generalize and attribute to black people. I walked home. It was dark. It was about 100 yards from his door to my own. I was scared. His grandmother and I share the same fear of what could happen to me in my own community. Even more so because I faced the threat of violence from police, even as a child. But she can't see my fear. She saw me as part of the problem.
Going for Ronald and Sam for that story. As Emily mentioned in the intro, Grown Up Storytime is trying to bring all kinds of different voices to their lineup right now. And as you can tell from the stories that you've seen tonight, there are tons of different stories. There are tons of different voices. Everybody has their own unique experience. You should write it down, and you should submit it to grownupstorytimehouston@gmail.com. And who knows, maybe it could be read on one of these shows. Who knows? You should do it. What do you have to lose? So, before we get into our last story of the night, we again wanted to show you another part of our house. If the FBI can actually hack into our televisions and our PlayStation webcams, this is what they see all the time. Usually I'm here Ned's here.
I'm over there.
And, probably more beer cans and pizza crust in front of us. Behind us, I do want to show off this crazy coincidence. Ned and I are both Louisiana boys who happen to be here in Texas, so we've got the Louisiana flag back here. As you can see, the Pelicans, union, justice, and confidence, something no one in Louisiana has in their government. All right, so your last story for tonight. Wow, this is awesome. Ned, did you see who wrote this story and who's reading it?
No, tell me. Lay it on me, baby.
Oh, my God. Y'all, I didn't realize we had a friggin' power couple associated with the show tonight, because this story is called From Cradle to Grave, written by the absolutely phenomenal Brendan Bork-Shiel and read by just one of my absolute favorite people, Katie Parr Communale. Ned, hit it.
From Cradle to Grave. Back when we all first started social distancing, I asked myself, what's a way for me to be around people without putting them at risk? And the answer was obvious. Go to a cemetery. Lots of people, zero risk of infection, and as a bonus, way less social anxiety than I would get around the living. So, like a Victorian poet, I started taking daily walks through my local graveyard. For the most part, it was a great excursion from social media, which, back then, was nothing but memes about Tiger King and toilet paper hoarding. The one thing that made these graveyard outings a little eerie was the fact that this plot happened to be full of people who died from yellow fever in the 1800s. Like, half the stones in this place belonged to casualties of the outbreak, including a mass grave of unidentified bodies in the back. And even though being around a bunch of people who died from one pandemic while you're in the middle of another pandemic is kind of bleak, it made me feel a certain kinship with those beneath my feet. I felt like we could commiserate. Maybe this is just because prolonged isolation was slowly chipping away at my sanity, but I felt like we were bonding. One of my favorite graveyard activities became headstone shopping. I'd browse all the various stone cuts and engravings and start doing sketches in my head of what I'd like my own grave to eventually look like. And I know I'm only 30 and making burial decisions might seem a little premature, but on the other hand, there's a pandemic. And I'm a teacher, so maybe not. One thing I knew for sure was that I couldn't afford a headstone. They are criminally expensive. I looked into it, and once you factor in sandblasting and installation, you're looking at $1,000 minimum. So I had to rule that out for me. Instead, I started paying attention to the more modest graves in the plot. My question became, how do I make my grave stand out without breaking the bank? I actually think this could be a great premise for one of those designer shows on HGTV. If current trends continue, we may need it. But anyway, my focus on less costly burial is what first led me to notice the grave of Linda Ann James, 1948 to 1917. Linda just had one of those simple, flat grave markers, but overlooking it, she had a whole nativity scene set up, like the kind you see in old people's homes around Christmas. There was a full menagerie of little plastic figurines inside a stable, and on either side of the stable were these garden lights that could illuminate the whole scene at night. The lights were what really sold it. At dusk, those lights switched on, and Linda's humble little square of graveyard suddenly became the main attraction. Whoever Linda's family is, I admire the hell out of their ability to get a thrifty but distinctive memorial that could upstage entire family crypts. One day, I was walking past Linda's grave, and the baby Jesus in her nativity scene was gone. Everything else looked completely undisturbed. It was just Jesus who was MIA. Maybe if the three kings and donkey were gone too, or if Mary and Joseph were face down in the mulch, I could have attributed this missing Jesus to windy weather. But the fact that it was only Jesus missing felt way too poetic to be accidental. This, I decided, was grave robbing. And if it had been some other time, I probably would have just let it go. But again, this was the early days of the virus. I had an infinity of free time and anxiety just waiting to be misplaced into some bullshit like this. So I made it my mission to rectify the desecration of Linda's grave and find her a new Jesus. This turned out to be more complicated than you'd think. Even when the world isn't locked down in quarantine, they typically don't sell plastic baby Jesuses by themselves. You have to buy them as part of a set along with the rest of the nativity. And while I considered buying a whole menagerie just to get another Jesus, I realized that would mean separating the new Jesus from his family, which I worried Linda would not appreciate. So I started searching the internet for orphan plastic baby Jesuses, and I actually did find one on Amazon. But the idea of making a bunch of minimum wage workers sprint around a warehouse during a pandemic just didn't seem right. Then I remembered a friend who'd had a king cake not too long ago. If you don't know, king cakes are usually really colorful Mardi Gras cakes that usually have a little plastic baby Jesus baked into them because, I don't know, I guess Cajuns like to flirt with the line between being devout and being sacrilegious. I knew it was a long shot, but I texted my friend to ask if she still had the baby from the cake. And she was like, "Why do you need a tiny plastic baby Jesus?" And I was like, "Don't worry about it. Do you have it or not?" And as fate would have it, she did. So she left the Jesus out on her doorstep for me, and I wiped him down with Lysol and took him to Linda's grave. But my hopes of bringing peace to the dead were dashed when I got there, and it became clear that the baby was way too big for this nativity scene. It was almost as big as Mary, and the idea that she could have just given birth to this monster and lived to tell the tale seemed hard to believe, even in the context of a Bible story. This probably should have been a moment to shrug and laugh it off, but this was right around the time it was starting to click for me that the pandemic was going to rob me of my summer paycheck, and I was going to have trouble making rent soon. Maybe my feelings about that bled over into my feelings about the Jesus situation, because suddenly I had a powerful urge to chuck that cake baby into the bayou and shout, "God damn it, this is bullshit!" But I was surrounded by a bunch of dead Christians, so I checked myself. Instead, I kneeled down and I said, "I'm sorry, Linda. I thought I could take care of this for you, but I guess not. Maybe when the toy stores open back up, I can steal a baby from a Barbie set or something." That's when I noticed what looked like a colorful little rock wedged deep between Linda's stone and the manger. And sure enough, it was the original baby Jesus, cradle and all. I wiped the dirt off his face and returned him to his rightful place as Linda's centerpiece. And even though I just wasted 48 hours trying to replace a plastic baby that was never actually missing, I felt like I had actually accomplished something. For the first time since lockdown started. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was still a bad day, within a bad week, within a bad era of human history. But hey, silver linings. Appreciate those silver linings, folks, because as that plastic baby Jesus reminded me, the distance from cradle to grave is always shorter than you think. Thank you.
What a fantastic reading and what a fantastic story. Guys, I'm trying to keep it kind of quiet right now because Connor doesn't know the last story already finished. We're going to see his room, okay? So come with me, but be very quiet, okay? I'm getting close to it. Let's see. It's just through here, okay? So everyone, be cool. We're going to check it out.
You're not supposed to be in here. Get out!
Oh no! Oh, I gotta get out of here, guys. I think that's gonna be our show. I gotta go protect myself. But while you're at it, go on Instagram, go follow Grown Up Storytime, go to Venmo and donate to the writers and performers tonight at Gus Houston. And if you have a story that you want to submit or you're interested in learning more about the program, go to grownupstorytime@gmail.com. Send them a message. And also, if you want to follow what Connor and I are doing, you can go to www.fnrager.com. Thank you so much for tuning in. Oh, God! Oh, God.